On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the East Shore, we are happy to welcome you to the Guilford Board of Finance Candidates Debate. My name is Carol Reimers. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Connecticut, and I live in Killingworth, and I am the moderator for this debate. The League of Women Voters is a national, state, and local nonpartisan organization of women and men. We are pleased to sponsor these debates like this one because we believe that in an informed electorate leads to a strong democracy. The candidates for 4 seats on the Board of Finance are Veronica C. Wallace and Kenneth Gammerman, Democrat, Peter Golitz, Jeffrey Beatty, and Jonathan Triada, Republican. Each candidate will have a 1-minute opening statement on their qualifications, which will be followed by a series of questions. Each candidate will have up to 1 minute to respond to each question, followed by 30-second rebuttals as needed. A drawing took place before this event to determine the order of the candidates' responses. And we will maintain that same order after all the subsequent questions. So let's begin with the opening statements. And Ms. Wallace, would you please begin?
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring the debate tonight. And I'd also like to thank GCTV for hosting us, and my colleagues for being willing to sit down and discuss the issues that face the town of Guilford. My name is Veronica Wallace. I am married 35 years to my husband Richard. We raised 2 children and we have 2 grandchildren. I served for 8 years on the Guilford Board of Selectmen, and I've had multiple volunteer opportunities to serve Guilford on the Marina Commission for over 20 years, as well as Guilford's 375th Anniversary Committee and the Interfaith 9/11 Memorial Service, which I co-chaired with my friend Gloria. So I'm very eager to have this discussion tonight. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Golitz?
Thank you. My name is Peter Golitz, and originally I'm from Allentown, Pennsylvania. I went to Sacred Heart Grade School and Central Catholic High School. I earned a BBA from Wichita State University. I have an MBA from State University of New York at Buffalo. Moved to Madison in 1979. Have 3 kids that are products of the Madison school system. Have lived in Guilford since '94, worked with some of the top companies in the respected industries, Johnson & Johnson, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Smith Barney. Currently, I'm employed by Oppenheimer & Company as a financial advisor specializing in financial planning, retirement planning, estate planning. I hold a Series 7 license and a 63 license, which is a state law license, and a Series 65, which is a license for as an investment advisor. I'm also licensed as an agent for annuities and life insurance in several states. I'm currently a member of the Board of Finance. I've also been a past member of the Planning and Zoning Committee in Guilford. I was chairman of the Planning Committee. I was a member of the Regional Planning Commission of South Central Connecticut. I sat on the board of directors of...
Thank you very much. Mr. Beatty?
Thank you. My name is Jeff Beatty. I'm an attorney here in town with a practice at Beatty & Beatty LLC on the Green. I grew up in Guilford. I've been in practice here since 1996. My family and I moved back to town in 2001. I've served on the boards of a number of art organizations, including the Guilford Arts Center, the Guilford Community Fund, the Guilford Foundation. I'm the past chairman of the Guilford Board of Ethics. Served on the library board, and I'm a current member of the Board of Finance seeking re-election. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this event, and thank GCTV for conducting the televising of the event, and my panelists here for coming out and discussing the issues.
Thank you. Mr. Trotta?
All right, thank you, Carol. So first, I'd like to thank our host, GCTV, of course, the League of Women Voters, and our moderator, Carol. Say a quick hello here to my running mates, Jeff and Peter, and good evening to our Democratic candidates, Veronica and Ken. My name is Jonathan Trotta. I hold a business degree in finance and economics from George Washington University. I work as an IT architect for Lockheed Martin. I've lived here in Guilford with my wife and 3 children. Hello, Erico, Sophia, Ari, and Leela, I love you. For almost 2 decades. And over the past 10 years, I've served on the Marina Commission, briefly on the Harbor Management Commission, and was elected to and served on the Board of Finance from 2011 to 2015. I'm running for the Board of Finance because I believe that more can be done to mitigate the tax burden on all property owners while still providing quality services to all residents.
Mr. Gammerman?
I'm Ken Gammerman, and we've lived in Guilford for over 30 years. I created and ran 2 companies here for the better part of that, and these were companies in educational media. My background is in education and business as a small business owner. My more immediate background, if we can call 25 years of service on the Board of Finance immediate, is that I've been an elected member on the Board of Finance for 6 terms. Please don't hold that against me. And I love the board. I love the opportunity to work in concert with my colleagues on both parties. The proudest moment I have of those years of service is working in coordination and collaboration with people on both parties. And we have created very much of a bipartisan feel on the board, and I think almost everyone would agree to that. And I'm pleased to be with you.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with our first question. Mr. Golitz, you'll be the first responder. What is your response to the residents who complain that our town and education budgets and taxes go up every year, and ask, why can't the town simply hold the line?
Well, that's a very good question. I hear that quite a bit. It's virtually impossible to have a flat tax, and one of the reasons is in order to have an expanding economy, you have to have an inflation rate of 2 to 3%. So you're almost guaranteed of a 2 or 3% increase because basically the cost of living goes up every year 2 or 3%. If you can go back 10 years ago in terms of what a dollar purchase, you know, bread in supermarket and all these consumer staple goods, they've all gone up. So it's virtually impossible to have a flat tax, and you can anticipate whatever the inflation rate is, that's what it's going to go up. Now the question is, if it goes up more than inflation, those are rates that you can't control, and obviously that would be real increases if it's higher than the inflation rate.
Okay. Mr. Beatty?
Thank you. I agree. That is a good question, and it's one we face year in and year out on the Board of Finance. Part of the reason why the taxes go up each year is that we have negotiated with the bargaining units throughout the town for their contracts in 3- and 4-year increments. So within those contracts, there are often wage increases for our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, and our public works employees. So those contracts provide for these increases. What we can do to offset those increases is to monitor other areas of spending. I don't want to call it discretionary spending because it's providing essential services and maintaining and improving our roads, our buildings, and our parks. But those are the areas where we can look at to try and minimize the increases that we face each year. The other aspect is to try and increase the grand list so that we're generating more revenue from the assets from the businesses that we have in town and additional residences.
And Mr. Trotta?
So for residents out there that are worried about perpetual tax increases, I consider myself to be one of them. And I do agree with my colleagues. The main driver for the tax increases is public sector wage inflation, which is really that we're all looking to earn more each year. We are all looking to get a raise. Public workers are no different than private workers. And this drives about 75% of the increases. But I believe that through making government more efficient, stop wasting taxpayer money, and to look to the revenue side and look for growth in the town, that we can mitigate the tax burden. So I believe that there is potential for taxpayers to pay at least lower increases, if not get closer to a flat tax rate.
Thank you. Mr. Gamerman?
Our current tax rate in the new budget for 2018 is 2%, and that's well within the range of inflation. And and that includes, as a matter of fact, a 6% increase in debt service to pay for our high school. And that raises a larger question, which is what Guilford wants and what Guilford feels it needs. And we have to contain rising taxes, we have to contain expenses, and we have to promote efficiencies. The main object that we have is to assure people that what they want in this town, they can get if we can afford it. And this is a town that has provided a new high school, a school system that is rated 6th in the state, and town services that are without comparison. This is a town of choice on the shoreline, and we have to watch what it costs us.
Thank you. Ms. Wallace?
Well, it's already been said, actually, pretty much. A lot of my colleagues have already indicated, some of the issues that face us. 85% of our budget is mandated. So that leaves 25%, which is discretionary funds.
15.
I think you have to look at the value that we get for our taxes. I agree it's very difficult for some people to have, an increase in their cost of living. I think the only real way to mitigate that, so it has real consequences, is to grow the grand list and real property tax reform. And this board or any future Board of Finance members are not privy to that. It would really have to come from the state to have real property tax reform for any of us to see real tax relief.
Okay, thank you. The next question. Will you work with state legislators to maximize all types of municipal aid to Guilford? And we'll start with Mr. Beatty.
Absolutely, I'd work with our state legislators to maximize aid to the town of Guilford. I think in the time that I've been on the Board of Finance and in the other areas that I've served the town, I've been able to work with all of our representatives, Representative Scanlon, Senator Kennedy, and Representative Candelora, to share my concerns about the aid that's coming from the state, the concerns that have been voiced to me by people of the town as to what can be done to increase the amount of aid that the state gets, and also to keep in contact with them about what our concerns are, what we're forecasting for the town in terms of our needs. For example, when we built the high school, we knew that there was going to be debt service that we're going to have to address, and so we're right in the middle of repaying that debt, and so the amount of the impact that the state aid has will have a greater weight in these years than it might at any other time, past or future.
Okay, Mr. Trotter?
So I'm pretty concerned about state revenue. I think we all are in the last few weeks. I think the trend over the last 10 years or so has really been that the state has reduced its grants and aid to towns. I believe if you looked at our state revenue grants from 2005, and if you looked at them about now, you'd see that they're about half as much as they were in terms of a percentage of our budget. And this concerns me, and while I do want to convince our state representatives to provide fair revenue for Guilford and fair grants for Guilford from our state budget, I'm also worried that the state is spending money that it doesn't have and that we're contributing to a bigger problem. And I want to look to Guilford to be more reliant and to not depend on this money as much going forward, because I think we've seen that we can't count on it.
Mr. Gamerman?
Well, we're currently, even as we record this program, we are waiting to see what the state will do with the current budget that it's negotiating. I believe that it passed through the House with some severe cuts. They may be, they're ready for the Senate, and they'll be submitting it to the governor, and we're still without a budget. Here we are at the end of October without a budget. But we do talk to our representatives. We work closely with them It's fair to say that the representatives are tied in together out of these 169 political entities that we have in the state. There are a lot of pressures from the cities, pressures from the town, and we can pride ourselves in Guilford as being a town that has provided a rainy day fund, provided an adequate fund balance, so that regardless of how we're going to be hit, we've got the resiliency to respond effectively.
Ms. Wallace?
Of course, I'll work with our state delegation. I worked with them when I was on the Board of Selectmen, Senator Meyer, Patricia Widlitz, Deborah Heinrich. I worked with them quite intimately on a lot of issues facing Guilford. I also worked with the federal delegation when I was on the Marina Commission, you know, dredging and bringing federal monies to Guilford. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected to the Board of Finance, I'll absolutely work with our state representative, Sean Scanlon, and State Senator Ted Kennedy, of course. I'd like to go back to something that I neglected to say earlier in my opening statement, and that's just simply my education background. I hold a bachelor's degree from the University of New Haven, and I currently work for the 5th largest accounting firm. So I just thought I'd take a chance to get that out there.
Thank you. Mr. Golitz?
Yes, it's very important to work with our elected officials in Hartford so they get a feel in terms of what we need and the pain that we do suffer. This is a great community, but obviously we still rely on the state to provide some funding for a lot of the programs. But the state is really in bad shape, as we all know. In terms of the tax burden, we have one of the highest in the United States. And as far as income, we're supposedly a very rich state as well. The problem we're facing is the fact that there are 3 things that are hurting the state as well as Guilford. One of them is pension, salaries, and health care. And unless the state gets that act in order, we're going to have issues getting more funding. So we have to communicate with our legislators, get close to them, but obviously they have to vote in a direction that's going to balance the budget.
Okay, thank you. Oh, does anybody have a rebuttal that they would like to add at this time? Okay.
No, thank you.
Our third question, we'll start with Mr. Trotta. Can the town's fiscal health or management be improved, and if so, how?
I'm very glad you asked me that question, because I believe a lot of taxpayer money is sort of left on the table. And I think by some innovative thinking that we can help taxpayers by mitigating the burden and still providing the same value in Guilford that we do now. I look at projects that we're doing in Guilford sometimes and I ask myself, hey, is this something we really need, or is this nice to have? And I've run into projects like that and I've voiced my opinion on them. And this is the kind of value I want to add to the board. I want to question the budget. I want to question each and every dollar of spending and say, wait a minute, can't we do better? I think during my term on the board from 2011 to 2015, I brought up many of the problems that face our budget, many of the areas where we can save. I think some of the bigger ones were obviously unfinished business from the Efficiency Tax Committee, the Efficiency Task Committee, who left several recommendations that have gone unvetted at this point, and I feel like this is a tragedy.
Thank you. Mr. Gamberman?
The budget process begins almost now, when, and it's been a very collaborative process and very bipartisan. We begin, and we are 2 subcommittees here on the Board of Finance, and we're subcommittees of the whole, actually, because we meet with the town departments in the public hearings on the budget. Each department head presents their budget, their wish list, and provide us with documentation. We go over that beginning in January. In December, we are working with the Board of Education on their budget. These budgets do not come to us as one locked up document. We are participating in them, we're sharing in them, we're working together with the Board of Education and with the Board of Selectmen in fashioning budgets that we feel are responsible and responsive.
Ms. Wallace?
Of course, we can always do better. I mean, there's no perfect solution. Everybody can always do better. I think we need to perhaps look at alternative forms of financing. For instance, reaching out to our neighbors. Maybe there we can. We already do it with the transfer station. What do I want? Regionalization. I couldn't think of the word. There are things we can do. We can always do better, and that's one way. We can work with other towns, even as something as simple as volume in paper purchasing. There's ways that we can save and we can do better.
Okay, Mr. Golitz?
Yeah, we have to be very creative because what hangs in Hartford, we have the same problems: pensions, health care, salaries. That makes up substantially the majority of our budget. So we could talk in terms of nickel diming here and there and have the short fixes, but unless we get a handle on how we can handle pensions, that are unfunded. Connecticut's pension, by the way, is the most unfunded, and the only other state that's worse than Connecticut is Illinois. So we do have to get creative. Maybe having 911, maybe have it a shoreline 911, possibly having one fire department for the whole shoreline, one fire police chief, and there's a lot of other things that we can coordinate and have it for a whole area. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce, they realize about having just a Guilford and Branford Chamber of Commerce, would get more synergy by combining the two. So they have one. We can do the same thing from the municipality level as well.
Thank you. Mr. Beatty?
Thank you. Of course we can do better. To echo Ms. Wallace's comment, I think that the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, and the Board of Selectmen, as well as the town department heads, each year will look for ways to improve upon the budget that they presented the prior year. Having said that, some of the areas that there have been concrete steps taken over the last few years to improve the savings that the town will realize, maybe not in the immediate instance, but over the long term. Those areas would include at the Board of Education the introduction of the health savings account, which they negotiated into the new agreement with the teachers union. The town now is looking at negotiating a similar health care package for its bargaining units. Those types of changes will result in substantive savings for the town down the road as healthcare costs continue to increase. Other areas that have been looked at are the town's rainy day fund. We've built that up to a point where it's allowed us to save substantially with the financing that when we've gone out to financing for projects.
Does anyone else have anything further to say on this question?
I do.
Okay.
Going back to something that Mr. Golitz brought up, it was about the state pensions. I'd like to point out that Guilford's pensions are funded between 85 and 90%. So Guilford has done the hard work. They've made the hard decisions. They've been prudent. We're very well positioned right now. I just wanted people to know that.
Any other comments?
I'd just like to correct, I was trying to get out that it's the Efficiency Task Force, sorry, and I said Efficiency Task Committee, but they've left some recommendations years back that have still not been implemented. And I believe those recommendations stand to save us close to $500,000 every year, year after year.
A lot of those recommendations from that task force, or task committee, or whatever we're calling it, Jonathan,
Right.
They come with a price tag, and a lot of them have already been implemented. A lot of them cannot be implemented because they have other implications. There's contracts and things like that that are involved. I think there's a commitment by whoever the first selectman candidate wins on November 7th. I think there's a commitment to go back to that and look at it, but the majority of those recommendations have been implemented and looked at.
Any further comment? Yes.
So I still think, we have some opportunities, I think, even with our finance director leaving in the last 2 years, to combine finance directors from the Board of Education side and the Board of Selectmen side. I think the same goes, too, for the IT directors and the facilities directors. So, we have two of these directors because of the way our budget is divided and the way our town government is divided. And I think the efficiency task force was correct in saying that, we should look at having just one.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll go to the next question. Can you suggest ways to improve the budgeting process? And we start with Mr. Gammerman.
I think the Board of Finance works on the budgeting process all year long, and it can be made more efficient, certainly. We can get materials submitted to us at an earlier point. As I indicated before, we begin meeting with the Board of Selectmen. We get their documentation in November and December for the next year. We begin meeting with the department heads over a 2-day workshop period in January. We work with the Board of Education in a series of longer meetings that begin in December. And we do, ask difficult questions and expect people to respond to what we deem as the limits of our ability to pay.
Thank you. Ms. Wallace?
One of the biggest frustrations I had when I was on the Board of Selectmen was that the public did not hear the presentations by the department heads and did not hear the pressures on the departments or the needs of the departments or what wasn't getting done or how, what they needed to adequately serve the citizens of Guilford. If I could wave a magic wand, I think that would be an area that I would like to find a way to improve, is to find a way to reach the public so that they had more of a sense of what it takes to run a municipality and the pressures that some of these departments face, in particular social services. Some of the smaller departments, they literally run on a shoestring.
Mr. Golitz?
The way basically the budget is approved in Guilford, I think it's a very, very efficient way of doing it. Obviously, as Mr. Gammerman pointed out, we spend 2 days meeting and sitting in the selectmen's meetings, listening to what each department's needs are, and of course, over a period of time, the numbers are, very critically evaluated, and some of the numbers are cut and so forth. I'm sure that there are ways to improve it, but I just wanted to let everyone know that we go through a very thorough process, and every single dime is looked at and every single penny is accounted for.
Mr. Beatty?
Thank you. The ways to improve the budget process, one is ideally would be to start the process later, because we're still in limbo, as Mr. Gammerman noted earlier, with regard to the state's budget, and that makes up a component of our budget that goes into factoring what we ultimately present to the voters of the town to approve. But that's not likely to happen, because we want to get started earlier in the season so that we can meet with the department heads, we can meet with the Board of Selectmen, we can meet with the Board of Education to find out what exactly we need, what we want, and what maybe we need to put off down the road. To follow on what Ms. Wallace mentioned, I think that increasing public awareness of the process is key. How do we do that? Well, our meetings our workshops are televised, our meetings are televised. We encourage people to attend and ask questions. We have a town meeting. Maybe there's ways to broadcast it on social media or YouTube that would increase awareness of what's going on and drum up public interest.
Thank you. Mr. Trotta?
I think we may all be in agreement. I'm really impressed with the way the Board of Selectmen has us meet with all their department heads to discuss their budget. I'd really like to see some kind of activity like that with the Board of Education. And don't get me wrong, they are meeting with us, but it's not as deep a dive with some of their leadership and some of the people who are in charge of those budgets more intimately. I think that would be a big plus. I definitely feel that we need to get more of the information from the town electronically. We work with paper, which I also like. I'm an old-fashioned guy, I like to work with paper, but when we work electronically with spreadsheets, I think it gives us the ability to trend and look at the data in a lot of unique ways. I also want to talk a little bit about, we're always focused on a budget, an annual budget. I keep telling the board that we got to start looking at budgets over multiple years, I try to do my own kind of assessment of the budget over 10 years. And, just looking at the trends over multiple years can really help you understand the inflows and outflows and all the difficulties. And I just want to point out that the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities agrees, and they say this is one of the 12 habits of highly successful officials. So I just think it's a good practice and that we should adopt it.
Thank you. Mr. Gamera?
One of the difficulties in participating in the development of budgets is that we are hampered and hindered in many ways by state regulations and by the independence of the Board of Education. Jonathan mentioned something about getting a little closer on the Board of Education. I don't know how much closer we could get than to be at their meetings each month, and we do a little of that, because educational law is pretty restrictive, and the need to provide aid to students of differing abilities and differing disabilities is so enormous. And we, the public may not know that we're responsible for the education and care of children up until the age of 21. Now that's way beyond the high school graduation time, but that is part of the responsibility that we have. That, and there are limitations in the public sector as well.
Okay, since that was actually a rebuttal, does anyone else have any more that they'd like to add?
I
Swallow?
just would like to add to something that Mr. Beatty mentioned, and one of the frustrations I also felt is not getting the grand list earlier. We don't, the town doesn't get the final grand list until sometime in April, or, yeah, the end of March or April if we're lucky, and that's frustrating because that's the revenue piece, and you need that in order to present the budget.
I'll add one more item if it's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in recollection of my term from 2011 to 2015, I was also a little discouraged about when I got some of the bonding information for the bonding request for the school. With the town, they work a 5-year plan, and it's usually given to us in plenty of time to have several weeks to review it. But I know it's difficult to put these things together, but sometimes I remember getting bond requests very late in the process.
Okay, anyone else have any more they'd like to add?
I think Ken
Yeah,
does.
just a
Yes,
point of
Howard?
clarification. We do have a 5-year rolling capital plan in both the education and town areas. And I've been crying for those to be updated, and perhaps they will be. I think every month I'm told we're going to see it, but I don't see that holiday present wrapped in for consideration. But we should have it pretty soon. But we do have the town and the schools planning ahead and working toward it. I don't want to sound like an apologist for the town or the schools, because we're on their case quite diligently.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Aye.
No? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Ms. Wallace, you'll be the first to answer. Guilford's typical budget referendum gets about 15% voter turnout. Do you consider this to be a problem? And if so, what would you change?
Yes, it's a problem.
It's a big problem.
I don't know what I would change. I don't understand voter apathy. A local budget is without a doubt the most important basic thing. It affects your life. It's your roads, it's the education of your children, it's your police, your protection, your fire. It's so basic to everybody's daily life. Why people don't bother to come out and vote for it, I think is frustrating. I think it's a matter of perhaps finding another way, a more modern way. I mean, maybe the 169 Yankee towns and the New England way that we are, we need to like put it aside and find a more modern way to get information out there. Maybe it's live streaming. Maybe people don't come to meetings because they're being televised, so it's intimidating. I held office hours for people to come. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't.
Thank you. Mr. Golitz.
Yeah, it's apparently that a lot of the voters are indifferent, really. And I think what happens is if the issues are big, like a referendum or whatever, a school budget, and they'll come out in droves if they have a specific interest. I know, I think we advertise the elections and so forth all over town. It's in a newspaper, there's all kinds of signs and so forth. But I guess it's a matter of getting the public interested in maybe certain topics. Maybe if there's certain things that are really of critical importance, maybe emphasizing that to attract more voters to come in.
Okay, Mr. Beebe?
It's absolutely a problem, and as we can all talk about why it is, but I don't know if we're ever going to touch on a solution that's going to drive up interest. To touch on what Ms. Wallace said, you know, this is a budget, a decision, an act that will impact everybody in town directly through the checks that they write to the tax collector, and indirectly through the services that they may or may not use throughout the course of the fiscal year. How do we promote greater participation? Well, I know when it's budget season that practically to the point of annoyance, anybody I meet in the grocery store or on the sidewalk, I'll remind them that the budget is coming up for a vote and they need to go and vote, or attend meetings and ask questions. Taking advantage of social media, YouTube, any type of means to raise awareness is encouraging, but at some point people just get overwhelmed with that. So I don't know what the answer is.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta.
This problem we've talked about, I think, every debate, and we've even talked about it in some of our Board of Finance meetings. It's a difficult problem. People are busier than ever. They're working harder than ever to pay their tax bills, of course. And I think part of the solution is really this board itself. I believe that the purpose of the Board of Finance is really to, you know, have that oversight and governance over both the town budget and the Board of Education budget. And I think they're relying on us more and more and our representation to do the things that they would do if they were in our shoes at these meetings. And that is to question expenses, to try to find efficiencies, to say, hey, you know, we love Guilford, we love the value that's here, we want to be here, but we don't mind having that value for a lower tax bill. So I think they're relying on this board to do that job. And I'm discouraged sometimes because in many, many years, I really haven't seen this board maybe turn back a budget and say, can you make this a little lower?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gammerman.
Well, I think we're responding to the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen in the development process, but I quite agree with everyone. The only common document we get at a town meeting is this enormous broadsheet that could have been published in 1776, which has the entire budget laid out in agate type, where you're to read through these major things. I think perhaps it's a responsibility of our board to spell this out in a document before the vote, and that would be an innovation. It would be a way to do that in a bipartisan manner, to say, here is the budget going forward, these are the major areas of change, without having people go through this thing and try to cherry pick out the fire department or the park and rec and see what's going wrong, as though they're Inspector Clouseau, you know, looking for that one little problem. The problem is to understand where the increases are going and where the savings have been realized. Sorry.
Thank you.
You said stop, and I went through the light.
Does anyone have any further to say on the voter turnout?
Just, you know, Ken brings up a valid point. I mean, print costs, we're required to publish this mammoth document, and it costs the town an enormous amount of money. You know, it has to be in a publication of general admission or general, you know, where everybody can, you know, everybody can get it. There's got to be a better way. And whether it's electronic or something else, there's got to be a better way. Just even that would be a big way. But not budget hearings. It's what you were talking about, Jonathan. It's actual coming to the polls and voting on the budget. People don't.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I just want to comment on you know, Ken's point here. You know, what the public sees in that newspaper printout, which is nice to see that the budget is public, but it's really hard to understand what's going on behind those line items.
Yeah.
And, right, and I
it's-
feel they really are counting on us to look behind those lines and see what's going on. And then I, for one, think the intricacies of our budget are pretty complicated. I'm probably the only one sitting here. But I do think it's difficult for voters to get their mind around our budget and to be able to go and be effective at a hearing or with some comments, or, or even when they go to vote, whether they're making an excellent decision or not.
Thank you. Anyone else?
The only thing I would add is, we encourage the public to come to the meetings and ask questions. We're happy to, if we don't know the answers, to find out the answer and get back to people. So to the extent that we can make people aware that they're welcome to attend our meetings and ask questions and give us advice or suggestions, we welcome it. So.
All right, we'll go on to the next question. And Mr. Golitz, you'll be first with this one. Are you in favor of lowering the income limits for the senior tax relief program, which is currently set at $95,000 a couple and that's the highest limit?
Actually, it's a very difficult question. We need a grand list, obviously, and we obviously want to support the seniors that, basically can't afford to live here. I think we'd have to have a discussion in terms of how much lower we would want to go. You could go lower, but to what degree? The question is, how much revenue does the town lose as a result of that? So I'm not sure it's a question that could be answered with a yes or no, but I think we'd have to look at all the facts and how many people would be affected and what is the cost of the town.
Mr. Beatty?
I agree that it's difficult to give a yes or no answer right this evening. However, it is something that I'd be happy to look into further. Costs of living, while not rapidly increasing, are increasing year after year, and maybe it's a time to look at that figure and do an analysis to see what impact it has on the revenue line for the budget. The program that we have in place has been a tremendous success. It's a model for that other towns have followed in terms of their senior tax relief programs. So I think, but like any other program that gets developed, it bears looking at from time to time to see if it can be improved. So I'd be in favor of reviewing it to see if it's worthwhile to make an adjustment to provide greater benefits to our seniors.
So I've got a little bit older number on the ETRP, the Elderly Tax Relief Program. It's from 2014-15, but it does come from our finance director. We spent about $1 million on this program. This is kind of a tax within a tax. So if you're a resident of Guilford, your tax is just a little bit higher because you're trying to help the seniors in our town. I believe very strongly that this is a good program. I would not want to see this program go away. The income limit was something that I looked at and was a little astounded because it seemed a little large. But I want to note that after I did some research that this does come in line with average household income in Guilford. So I don't think I really do have a problem with the income level. I think it's fairly close to the average cost, average household income in Guilford. But I have spoken out against what I see as kind of an Achilles heel of this program, and that is there's no asset test. So what's odd is you could actually be providing some tax relief to someone who maybe has a $2.5 million home, because we don't actually know how much assets someone has who participates in the program. So I am hopeful that there's an honor system, and people who do enjoy a fairly wealthy lifestyle and have quite enough assets to cover their costs in their later years are using the honor system and not abusing the program.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gamerman?
We have over 20,000 residents in Guilford, and only about 800 people are qualifying for this tax relief program right now. So that's a fairly modest program. And when you say it costs $1 million, well, if we divide that among our taxpayers, it may be hitting each of our pocketbooks for $50 a year. And that's a small price to pay. I think there are larger issues embedded in this. which is the amount of affordable housing in the town. And I know that the selectmen candidates have both addressed that and both addressed that positively, that we should find more ways of having affordable housing so that people can live here because everybody wants to live here. This is a community of choice, not a community of escape.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wallace?
Would really have to see what the implications of lowering the income level would be for the town. When I was on the Board of Selectmen, one of the problem with the program, or there is no problem with the program, it works very well. But occasionally there are people who will come before the Board of Selectmen looking for relief because in that particular tax year they had an event happen to them, a medical event, and it caused them to go over the income threshold by $20 or $50 or $100. And it really caused duress because then there's no relief for them. They can't keep the tax freeze and they have to start all over again. I would prefer that we look at some form of mechanism to help those folks when there is a catastrophic event in their lives in a particular year.
Thank you. Anyone have any further to add to this particular question?
I have a little further to add. I mean, it's not really a rebuttal. I think we all think this is a great program. I mean, I think out of the tax dollars that I put towards the town, I'm pretty happy that some of them go to help seniors overcome costs who are on a fixed income. I think that's a good cause.
Anyone else? All right, we'll move to the next question. And Mr. Beatty, you will answer this. Do you think Guilford's operating costs would decrease with increased partnerships with area towns? And please elaborate.
The answer is I don't know. They might. There may be substantial costs to partner with other towns to reduce our operating costs. I think it's a subject that we should look into to explore in greater detail. The transfer station appears to have worked out very well for Guilford and Madison. I don't know which direction we would go to the north to Durham, to the west to Branford, to the east to Madison, and what services we'd consider collaborating with them on. If it makes sense to do it from a financial perspective, including the cost to transition from or activities that the town has managed and operated solely on its own, then of course it would make sense to do that. If it would be more expensive in the short term, then maybe it wouldn't be such a good idea. But it's definitely worth looking into. I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand. I just don't know whether or not it makes sense to do that. Obviously, if it reduces operating expenses and saves the town money in the long run, it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, Mr. Travis.
So, absolutely, I think there's great potential here for regional services. I think Jeff even touched on the possibility for safety, for shoreline 911 and so forth. Of course, the devil's in the details. Sometimes you think something's going to work perfectly and it doesn't, but I do think the potential's there. I think the dump is kind of the proof that we have the transfer station, and that's worked as a shared effort between Madison and Guilford. But I think if I was to tell you specifically which ones, I think there was a little bit of talk about animal control and maybe kind of mixing that and having a facility that handled stray animals. There's probably more. I think that all of them should be vetted. Any opportunity for efficiency, any opportunity to not leave taxpayer money on the table that doesn't necessarily have to be spent and still provide the same service, that's something I'm interested in.
Thank you. Mr. Gamerly?
Yes, as long as mosquitoes don't have citizenship in either Guilford or Madison, we can certainly explore mosquito control. We can certainly explore other health issues. But many people don't realize that we now have examples of cooperation in the Board of Education. Every month we're looking at numbers that include children that are taking some kind of special education program in Old Saybrook or in other districts. And so some of that is underway. And I think it's limited only by the imagination of the leadership of the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen. They have to take the initiative on that to work with other municipalities to realize some savings.
Ms. Wallace?
Costs might decrease, but probably not at the beginning. And I say that based on our experience with combining the probate court system. The town of Guilford and the town of Madison each incurred expenses to do that in terms of infrastructure. But ultimately, it's worked out very well. So yes, I think we probably could find some savings, but probably not in the beginning. A lot, as my colleagues here have already indicated, we already do. We have a regional SWAT team. We already do the transfer station. We already have mutual cooperation in the library with, I think it's called Lion, which is the sharing of library books. So a lot already happens. Can we do more? Sure. But we really need to look at it and look and find out what the costs are up front. But ultimately, it probably would save us money.
Okay, Mr. Golitz?
Yeah, we have to look at every possible opportunity to save, and as everyone knows in this room, basically the state pension is so underfunded, the worst in America, with the exception of Illinois. So looking at regional type of operations, there could be considerable savings. Erie County, it's in Buffalo. They have a county government. They have a county executive, and apparently it's worked out well. The fact with the probate judges, I think we had like 154, and now we're down to 50 or something. I'm not sure exactly, but it's substantially less. We saved quite a bit in terms of salaries, in terms of pensions, in terms of health care. So 911 would be definitely an area that we could implement. And even economic development, you can have one. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the Chamber of Commerce in Guilford decided to form the chamber with Branford. I don't know what they call it. I think they call it Shoreline Chamber of Commerce. So there's always, you got to look at those things.
Thank you. Any further on this question? Okay. The next question, and that will go, Mr. Trotta will start.
All right.
Are you concerned about our current or long-term bonding vis-a-vis our credit rating, or as it impacts the tax burden?
Of course I am. Obviously, we just made one of the biggest historic purchases in the history of Guilford. We purchased the Guilford High School, which is absolutely beautiful. I walked through the older high school and got the tour and realized all the problems, and I think we made an extremely wise decision. I don't think we wanted to pour money into that structure. We wanted to build a new structure. I think, maybe call it luck, we ran into the lowest historical interest rates that I can remember, or perhaps in 100 years. And I believe we did the right thing. But now we sit on the pile of debt we do owe for that beautiful school. And we are actually flirting with what Standard & Poor's would call maybe moderate debt for a municipality. And I think that we need to be very careful going forward that we don't start bonding for more projects and slip into a moderate or even an elevated debt ratio. This could affect our bond ratings, could affect how much it does cost for us to borrow.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron?
Well, it's important to note that the S&P Global ratings and the Fitch ratings have us up about as high as you can get. We have a AAA Fitch rating. And when one looks at the reports, and I just summarized a couple of items on that, we are rated very highly by Fitch and S&P for strong management with good financial policies, strong budgetary performances with an operating surplus in the general fund, and total government fund level that is adequate, strong liquidity, and strong debt and contingent liability position. We're in good shape. Our spending growth is marginally above that of our revenue. We've been cited positively for conservative budget practices, for strong reserve levels, for a superior level of budget flexibility. Our fund balance is at 11% of operating expenditures, and I think it's about $2.3 million right now. And I could go on, but these are the, but I can't.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wallace?
I think it's prudent to be concerned about our level of bonding, but I think prior boards of finances and prior boards of selectmen in the past have done a lot of hard work. They've put together a plan that leaves Guilford in a very good position today, which is why we are enjoying the AAA bonding. We've made the decisions that put us where we are today and allowed us to refinance our bonds, to save money. We stopped our reliance on the general fund, which we had done for many years, and that was a decision that was in conjunction with the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance. So we've done the hard work in the past, and I think we're enjoying the fruits of all those hard decisions. So I think we're in a good position, and I am not concerned, but I would be cautious.
Mr. Golub?
Yeah, right now, Guilford is very solid, having the rainy day fund where it is, plus the fact that our spending is controlled, our revenue base is consistent. I don't foresee us ever dropping in a rating, except obviously if we continue to take on more debt and the revenue stream is not there to support that debt. As long as you have revenue coming in, you're fine. As long as you can, it's kind of like your own checkbook. If you have money coming in, you could spend a lot of money. But you have to basically make sure that it's not, it's sensible spending and it's calculated spending that is necessary.
Excuse me. Mr. Beatty?
I think our current level of bonding is appropriate. I mean, there have been a number of projects that we've needed to accomplish over the years, and most notably the high school. And because the town, through its Board of Education, Board of Selectmen, and Board of Finance has been managed properly, we've been able to improve our bond rating, which has resulted in a lower interest rate, which has resulted in savings to the town. And because of that, because of our strong credit rating, we were able to refinance, as Ms. Wallace mentioned, and we're ultimately going to save the taxpayers of the town about $26 million in debt payments that we would have had to pay for the high school. With regard to future bonding, that one of the, I think one of the great accomplishments over the last 8 years has been that we've incorporated capital expenditures into the operating budget so that we're not bonding for as many projects down the road. As a result, the amount of bonding that we're going to have to do will be less, meaning we'll have less debt service, and that's for the ultimate benefit of the town.
Thank you.
Can we add to that?
Yeah, I'm now, excuse me.
May we add to that?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So I think most of us agree that we're in good financial shape and we're within kind of what the rating agencies would like us to be to retain our A rating. But I do want to point out that we kind of
AAA.
AAA, but we could have done a little better job, what I would call like smoothing out our capital outlays. And I think we saw that when the town actually did vote against the budget 2 years ago, and it was really because this debt that was coming in for the high school, we kind of knew it was coming, this steep wave of debt. We didn't really prepare for it. And I think of like my household income, geez, I got to buy a car, maybe I should save up for a down payment. I felt like the brakes weren't really on for capital spending in other areas, even though we planned to buy the high school. And just as an example, I used to get about $1.6 million bond requests from the high school. The last one was $5.3 million.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this? Want to miss you. Apologize for coughing. So, our next question. Assuming that your goal is to keep taxes at a minimum while maintaining the quality of life and education in Guilford, what resources do you use to determine the proper allocation for a line item or department? And Mr. Gamberman, you're first.
Well, I think this takes us back into the investigative process of budget building, where we have to be very active on the Board of Finance in doing our homework, attending these meetings, and determining what is being put before us, and trying to understand that. If anything, I'd like to see us get documentation in advance of these meetings that we have as the committee of the whole. But we are limited, I think as Ms. Wallace said, we're limited by the fact that 85% of our budget is spoken for, certainly more in education. There's very little discretionary money left to us. And people are registering their wishes as to what they want with this town. And people do want a superior quality of life. Our responsibility is to tell them, the town, we cannot afford to go beyond this limit. But we have done some rather extraordinary things in the last 10 years, and we're all very proud of them, in town and school.
Thank you. Ms. Wallace?
Well, I echo pretty much what Ken said. I think perhaps one of the tools needed is to talk to people, hear what they have to say. What exactly are they looking for? I mean, it's very clear on the education side of the budget that class sizes are extremely important to people. So you have to prioritize the needs of the community against the pot of money that you have, and do the best that you can.
Okay, Mr. Golitz?
Yeah, the budgetary side of it, it's obviously it's a very complicated process, and sometimes you have to be prudent to make your dollars go farther, so to speak. But we have a good town, and we've had good management, so the money that's spent is spent wisely. And we can't, like, we all might want to drive Ferraris, but sometimes it's not practical. And I think the same thing when we determine how the money is going to be spent and so forth. Practicality and the revenue coming in to pay for it is very critical to making those decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Beebe?
I think it comes down to the collaborative effort of the Board of Finance with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education to come up with goals that are going to reduce or minimize the tax increases. Having those discussions early on in the budget process gets the message out to the department heads on the town side to come in with zero growth budgets, which I believe they've been working and have presented for most of the last 8 years. On the Board of Education side, it's talking to the superintendent and so that he can or she can pass the word down to the principals and the department heads within the schools about what's expected for them for the upcoming year to keep costs at a minimum. Then getting all that information and looking at it to see where there may be areas where we can reduce the increase further, so that when the time comes to present a budget, we've done so in a way that will reduce the expenses, while at the same time keeping an eye on taking steps we can encourage within the town to increase economic development to get more coming in on the revenue side.
Thank you. Mr. Trotta?
Yeah, so especially the way the numbers are presented to us, I think a lot of attention does go towards increases. For instance, with some of the bargaining units, we saw increases in salary between maybe 1.75% to 3%. But occasionally, you'd see a bargaining unit and the increase was 9%. So when things are sort of out of whack, that's really what gets my, my first eyebrow to go up, and I say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's some savings to be had here. And, another instance would be, would you believe that 22 salaries on the Board of Education might take up maybe about, 3-4% of the budget, and that's kind of astounding, right? So this, and sometimes when you see smoke, there's fire. Another thing I worry about too is, how much value is being added. I look at our technology program in school. I'm very much for it, but I also wonder, do we have to give every student a Chromebook when maybe 85% of the students in Guilford already have a device? So things like that catch my attention, and I wonder, can we save money? Are we leaving the taxpayers' money on the table that should go back in their pocket?
Thank you. Okay, this will be our last question.
Can I just respond?
Oh, sure.
The Board of Education is very prudent with their budget, and the value that we get, we're the 6th, I believe that's correct, or in the 6th district, top district. So there's value for what we're doing. We have wonderful facilities, Chromebooks for every child. Technology is so important today. We have to prepare our children for the 21st century. I just had to say that.
Sure. Anyone else have any comments?
We don't want to take a Chromebook away from your child.
Well, you know, I agree with that. Of course, I want to see someone have a Chromebook, but it just surprised me. My daughter went to the high school, and, you know, we did buy her a device, and they actually told her that she couldn't use her device. They had to use a Chromebook. But this is just a small example where I just want to try to do better. I want to vet out, you know, each issue for the taxpayer and see if there is some money to be saved. I didn't mean to pick on the Board of Education. I'm very impressed with the schools here. It's why I live here. And I'm very impressed with the board members on the Board of Education on both sides. So I don't feel that way, that they're not doing a good job.
Great.
I just always strive to be better.
But to your point about the Chromebooks, I mean, the reason probably, and I do not know this, but just from my background, I'm sure that they wouldn't let your daughter use your personal Chromebook because there's security issues. And you know, they have to follow the IT protocols and limits and filters.
Anyone else? Mr. Beatty? Okay, I thought you were about
Nah.
to say something. Okay, are we ready for the last question?
Bring it on.
Okay. All right. If elected, what impact do you hope to have on the Board of Finance? What do you hope to accomplish? And we'll start with Ms. Wallace.
Oh, my goodness. What do I hope to accomplish is to bring a woman's perspective back to the board. We haven't had a woman on the board since Kim Brockett was on it, and I think it's needed. So I hope to bring my leadership skills, my experience, and a woman's point of view to the Board of Finance.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Golden?
One of the things that I've always looked at when I look at line items and so forth, I always look in terms of how much of an increase. I look at the indices, you know, like in consumer price index, inflation rate. I try to keep the increase in line with what the inflation rate is, and I'm comfortable with that because, you know, that's the purchasing power. Whatever the inflation rate is, I mean, that's what it costs you to buy the same product, you know, 2 years down the line. So basically, I'm going to keep everyone honest. We've been doing that for the last 4 years. And basically, we want to make sure that the expenditure is prudent and it's something that we really need and it benefits the individuals in the town. Anytime we do spend money, the question is, what is the return to the town and how much does it cost the town?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Beatty?
Thank you. The impact that I hope to have on the Board of Finance is to continue to keep the town's financial health sound. In the 4 years that I've been serving on the Board of Finance, what's impressed me is the dedication of the department heads, of the members of the Board of Education, the members of the Board of Selectmen, and the superintendent and staff at the high school to keep an eye on the funds that they're spending and how they're being spent to provide the quality services to the town. What I hope to accomplish, should I be reelected for another 4 years, is to make sure that we don't fall in to some of the traps that we've fallen into many years ago, where we have a smaller fund balance, where we're bonding more for projects, because in the long term, those decisions will have a negative impact on the financial health of the town.
Thank you. Mr. Trotter?
So I think I'm going to echo that concern for conservative financial oversight. You know, obviously, we want to keep our debt ratio low, and we want to keep at least a month in the bank with our rainy day fund. I also want to go a little further and say that, you know, I really want to try to achieve a reasonable tax structure. Obviously, there's a tipping point for our property values when we start paying a large amount for services in town compared to other towns that you know, people might want to live in as well. I won't mention our neighbor to the east, but you know, I don't want to see that mill rate grow so large that your house doesn't seem as attractive as it was before. The other thing I want to keep doing is I just want to keep turning stones. I want to keep looking for savings for the taxpayer. I want to question the programs. I want to question, does the program add the value that we expect for the cost? I want to keep asking those questions for the taxpayer because they are busy. and they're counting on the candidates here and this board to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron?
Well, I'm proud of and a little hesitant about talking about 25 years on the Board of Finance, but that's what I've served as. And I don't feel that entitles me to anything. But I do see the challenges ahead. And I am very proud of the fact that we have brought reasonable and measurable growth in both our town and schools, all the facilities and public safety and land acquisition and the senior tax freeze and the all-day kindergarten on the school side. No one has mentioned that yet. And the special education support. I'm very proud of that, and I see the challenges ahead of us, especially in times of economic stress, and we are all experiencing that. And I just feel very proud to have served Guilford, and I'm looking forward to serving again if the voters give me that opportunity.
Thank you. Anyone else have any further to add to the last question? Okay, then now we've come to the time for closing statements. And we'll start with Ms. Wallace, who was first in the draw. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this debate tonight, and thank you to my colleagues for this great discussion on the issues that face the town of Guilford. I hope to serve on the Board of Finance, and I'm asking for your vote on November 7th. I think I bring the unique experience of having been on the Board of Selectmen for 8 years. I've put together the town budgets. I'm familiar with them. I'm familiar with the stresses that are on not only our taxpayers, but on our department heads as they try to serve the needs of everyone. And I'm looking for your support. I hope you learned something about me tonight, and I hope that I can be a steward of the town finances for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gomez?
Yes, Guilford is a great town, and I love living here, and thank you very much for putting on this debate and getting the viewers to understand our positions and where we want to go from here. My biggest concern, of course, is the health, not only of Guilford, but of the state because of the precarious position they're in. As you know, the pension liability is so bad that we've had a lot of companies leave. I mean, Bristol-Myers Squibb, UBS, GE, Aetna. And it's not only the companies. For the last 3 years, the population has been dropping in Connecticut. And one of the reasons it's been dropping is because the taxes are too high. I like what I've seen happening in Guilford. Joe Mazza and Charlie, they basically set up a program where new hires basically have defined benefit plans instead of defined contribution plans instead of defined benefit plans. Over the course of several years, that is going to be a tremendous saving to the town. It's unbelievable. Now, it's just a matter of taking time to get all the police officers and all the town employees to get on that. This is something that the state has to do. It's not even an option. They have to do that because they just can't survive at this particular time. So I would like to be reelected. I'm asking you for your vote, and based in terms of my educational level, my background experience, the fact that I know money, I know finances, I know the various economic indices and what they mean to the town and to the economy. So I look forward to your vote, and thank you very much for putting up with me for 4 years. I look forward to doing a good job in the next 4 years.
Thank you. Mr. Beatty?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for moderating and hosting this event. I'd like to thank GCTV for broadcasting it. I'm looking forward to continuing the progress that the town has made in improving its financial health. In the 4 years that I've been on the budget, on the Board of Finance, I should say, I believe we've presented reasonable budgets, and we've taken advantage of the strong health of the town to reduce the debt service that we have, to grow our undesignated fund balance or a rainy day fund to a level that has resulted in our AAA rating, which will allow us to save money down the road when it comes time to finance future large projects. Part of the excitement that I've had in participating on the Board of Finance, and that I look forward to sharing on the next 4 years, should I be reelected, is working collaboratively with the members of the Board of Finance, with the members of the Board of Selectmen, with the members of the Board of Education, and the department heads and staff. We hear about the increase in taxes, and nobody likes to pay higher taxes, but it's been very educational for me over the 4 years that I've served to see the dedication and the commitment that not only the elected officials but the town employees have to doing the best jobs possible as efficiently as possible. Yes, there are always areas that we need to examine more closely to see if there are savings that we can realize, but I think it's important to remember that all of the members who are sitting here, who are serving the town, are doing what they think is best for the citizens of Guilford, to provide the essential services and to enhance the quality of life for Guilford and all its residents. And I look forward to trying to do that again for the next 4 years if I'm reelected.
Thank you. Mr. Trotta.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to try to wake up our GCTV viewers. I don't know how many of you we put to sleep, but I want to leave you with this question. Has the Board of Finance, as it's operated for decades, been adding value to our budget process? Or has it just been putting the final stamp on the bill? I strongly believe that the Guilford Board of Finance can do better for all of us. When this board does its job well, we deliver the town of Guilford to you for a lower cost. I believe that each and every resident deserves a Board of Finance that acts as a safety valve between the taxpayers and government spending, and candidates that have the political courage to say no to perpetual tax increases in spending. I feel a vote for Trotta is a vote for that very candidate.
Mr. Cameron?
The thing I'm proudest of in my years on the board first of all, let me thank the League of Women Voters. I neglected to. I'm in such a hurry to say things that I ignored the wonderful hosting of this event, and I appreciate it, as we all do. The thing I'm proudest of on the Board of Finance is the bipartisan nature of our board, and basically the bipartisan nature of the three boards. People are open to reasoning. People are open to discussion, and we have encouraged a collaborative process within our board and amongst the three boards that has been very productive. There is no antagonism, or a very low level of antagonism, if any, in the budget formation process. We are open amongst each other. We share the problems and the approaches, and I must say that in the years I've been here, most of the budgets have been approved the first time out of the gate, and we've mostly had unanimity. And even in the last budget, I think there was one dissent, and the rest of the members who were on this, well, I'm only looking at two others, the three incumbents all voted for the budget this last time around. So I would like to continue that spirit of cooperation and collaboration.
Thank you. The League of Women Voters of the East Shore would like to thank Guilford Community Television for recording this debate and airing it on Channel 18. And also you can find it online on YouTube before the election. I also would like to thank our League of Women Voters Voter Service Chairperson, Elise Lowe, who has worked hard to organize all our debates in the area. And also thank you to the candidates for participating in a lively and interesting discussion of the finances of Guilford. And we now turn to you, the voters, to speak out on November 7th. The polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And take your opportunity to make democracy work in Guilford. Thank you.